Women don't have the reflexes for close air support, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson declared, crossing Captain Sarah Mitchell's name off the Apache pilot roster. 3 months later, when insurgents overran Firebase Delta with 47 soldiers trapped inside, that same captain would pilot a critically damaged helicopter through a gauntlet of enemy fire that no male pilot had been willing to attempt. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Captain Sarah Mitchell adjusted her flight helmet as she walked across the tarmac at Fort Carson, Colorado. At 29, she possessed over 800 hours of helicopter flight time, including advanced combat training that had earned her recognition as one of the top 3 pilots in her class. Today marked her first day with the 4th Combat Aviation Brigade, where she hoped to finally earn assignment to an Apache attack helicopter unit. The morning air carried the familiar sounds of military aviation, rotor blades spinning up, ground crews conducting pre-flight inspections, and the distant hum of transport helicopters returning from training missions. Sarah had dreamed of this moment since childhood, when she'd watched Apache helicopters perform demonstration flights at air shows, their sleek profiles cutting through the sky with deadly precision. Her assignment papers directed her to Hangar 7, where Chief Warrant Officer Jake Anderson was conducting orientation briefings for new pilots. As Sarah approached the designated area, she noticed the usual demographic of military aviation, predominantly male pilots in their 20s and 30s, most carrying themselves with the confident swagger that came from years of flight training. The briefing room buzzed with conversation as pilots discussed their previous assignments and aviation experiences. Sarah chose a seat toward the middle, close enough to demonstrate engagement but far enough back to observe the group dynamics without drawing unwanted attention. She had learned through experience that first impressions in military aviation often determined how colleagues would treat her throughout her assignment. Anderson entered the room with the bearing of someone who had spent decades around military aircraft. His weathered face and calloused hands spoke of countless hours spent in cockpits and maintenance bays. He carried himself with the quiet authority that came from genuine expertise rather than mere rank. "Good morning, pilots," Anderson began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Welcome to the 4th Combat Aviation Brigade. Over the next 2 weeks, you'll undergo comprehensive evaluation of your flight capabilities, tactical knowledge, and operational readiness." Sarah listened intently as Anderson outlined the assessment process. Unlike many military evaluations that relied heavily on written examinations, this program emphasized practical demonstration of flying skills under increasingly challenging conditions. The final phase would involve simulated combat scenarios designed to test pilots' ability to perform complex maneuvers while under extreme stress. "Aircraft assignments will be based on your performance during evaluation," Anderson continued. "We have positions available for Black Hawk transport, Chinook heavy lift, and Apache attack helicopter crews. Competition for Apache slots is particularly intense, as we have only 6 available positions." Sarah's pulse quickened slightly. Apache helicopters represented the pinnacle of military aviation technology, sophisticated weapons platforms that required exceptional skill to operate effectively. The helicopters were equipped with advanced targeting systems, 30mm chain guns, Hellfire missiles, and electronic warfare capabilities that made them formidable assets in combat operations. After the briefing concluded, pilots gathered in small groups to discuss the upcoming evaluation. Sarah approached the cluster of aviators who seemed most focused on the Apache program, hoping to learn more about the specific requirements and expectations. "Mitchell, right?" asked Captain David Reynolds, a pilot whose uniform displayed an impressive array of aviation badges and combat ribbons. "What's your background?" "Fort Rucker for initial training, then advanced combat aviation at Fort Benning," Sarah replied. "Most recently stationed at Fort Hood flying Blackhawks in support operations." Reynolds nodded approvingly. "Solid foundation. Apache transition is intense, though. The weapons systems alone require months of specialized training. Plus, you need the right temperament for close air support missions." Another pilot, Major Robert Hayes, joined the conversation. "Apache crews deal with split-second decisions while coordinating with ground forces under enemy fire," he explained. "It's not like transport flying where you can take time to think things through." Sarah sensed an underlying message in their comments, though it remained unspoken. The implication seemed to be that her previous experience, while respectable, might not translate effectively to the demands of attack helicopter operations. She chose not to challenge their assumptions directly, instead focusing on gathering information about the evaluation process. Over the following days, Sarah threw herself into preparation with characteristic intensity. She spent hours in flight simulators, memorizing Apache technical specifications and studying tactical manuals that detailed close air support procedures. Her approach was methodical and thorough, leaving nothing to chance. The practical evaluations began with basic flight proficiency tests in training helicopters. Sarah performed flawlessly, demonstrating smooth control inputs and precise aircraft handling that impressed even the most experienced instructors. Her landings were consistently perfect, her navigation accuracy exceptional, and her radio communications clear and professional. However, she began noticing subtle differences in how instructors interacted with male and female candidates. Male pilots received detailed feedback on their performance, including specific suggestions for improvement and encouragement about their potential for advanced assignments. Female pilots, including Sarah, typically received more perfunctory assessments that focused on basic competency rather than excellence. The disparity became more apparent during weapons training simulations. When Captain Reynolds missed several target sequences during his evaluation, Instructor Chief Warrant Officer Mills provided extensive coaching on targeting techniques and sight picture fundamentals. When Sarah achieved higher accuracy scores on the same exercise, Mills simply noted satisfactory performance in her evaluation file. Sarah documented these interactions carefully, maintaining detailed records of her training performance alongside observations about instructor feedback patterns. She had learned from previous assignments that success often required not just excellent performance, but also the ability to navigate institutional biases that could affect career advancement. The tactical evaluation phase introduced more complex scenarios designed to test pilots' decision-making abilities under pressure. Sarah excelled in these exercises, consistently demonstrating sound judgment and innovative solutions to challenging tactical problems. Her performance in simulated emergency procedures was particularly impressive, as she maintained composure and executed proper protocols even when presented with multiple simultaneous system failures. Despite her strong performance, Sarah noticed that Apache assignment discussions rarely included her name. When she approached Anderson to inquire about her standing in the evaluation process, his response was diplomatically vague. "You're performing well, Captain Mitchell," he acknowledged. "Apache assignments require careful consideration of multiple factors beyond basic flight proficiency." Sarah pressed gently for more specific feedback. "Could you elaborate on areas where I might improve my competitiveness for attack helicopter positions?" Anderson hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "The Apache community is tight-knit," he said finally. "Crew coordination and unit cohesion are paramount. Sometimes the best qualified pilot isn't necessarily the best fit for the mission." The implications were clear, though unspoken. Sarah's technical qualifications were not in question, but concerns existed about her integration into the male-dominated Apache community. She thanked Anderson for his time and returned to her quarters to process this information. That evening, Sarah received a call from her former commanding officer at Fort Hood, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Davis. Davis had mentored Sarah throughout her early career and had specifically recommended her for the Apache training program. "How's the evaluation going?" Davis asked without preamble. Sarah described her experiences honestly, including the excellent performance scores and the concerning feedback patterns she had observed. Davis listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific incidents. "This isn't unexpected," Davis said finally. "Attack helicopter communities have been particularly resistant to integration. The arguments usually center on unit cohesion and combat effectiveness, but the underlying issue is tradition and comfort zones." Davis provided perspective based on her own experiences breaking barriers in military aviation. "Your technical skills aren't the issue," she explained. "The question is whether leadership believes you can perform effectively in combat conditions while maintaining the trust and respect of your crew and supported ground forces." They discussed strategies for the remaining evaluation period. Davis emphasized the importance of continuing to perform at the highest level while building relationships with key decision-makers. She also suggested that Sarah research the combat records of female pilots in other attack helicopter units, gathering data that could counter arguments about combat effectiveness. The final week of evaluation included advanced tactical scenarios that simulated actual combat conditions. Sarah found herself paired with different co-pilots for each exercise, providing opportunities to demonstrate her ability to work effectively with various personality types and flying styles. During one particularly challenging exercise involving close air support for troops in contact, Sarah flew with Chief Warrant Officer Mike Torres, a veteran Apache pilot who had recently returned from deployment in Afghanistan. The scenario required precise coordination between aircraft and ground forces while navigating simulated enemy air defenses. Sarah's performance was exceptional. She maintained perfect communication with ground controllers while executing complex attack runs that neutralized simulated threats without endangering friendly forces. Her weapons employment was accurate and efficient, and her defensive maneuvering successfully avoided multiple surface-to-air missile threats. After the exercise concluded, Torres provided detailed feedback during the debriefing session. "Outstanding flying," he said simply. "Best coordination I've seen from any pilot in this evaluation cycle." His assessment carried significant weight, given his combat experience and reputation within the Apache community. Other instructors took note of his comments, and Sarah sensed a subtle shift in how some personnel viewed her capabilities. However, not all feedback was positive. During the final evaluation meeting, Sarah overheard a conversation between Anderson and Lieutenant Colonel Thompson, the senior officer responsible for Apache assignments. "Mitchell's technical skills are undeniable," Anderson was saying. "Her scores are in the top 2% of all candidates we've evaluated." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Thompson's response was measured, but revealing. Technical proficiency is important, but Apache crews operate in an environment where personal relationships can mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Integration challenges could compromise unit effectiveness. Sarah realized that despite her exceptional performance, institutional resistance remained a significant obstacle. The final assignment announcements would be made the following morning, and she spent the evening preparing mentally for potential disappointment, while maintaining hope that merit would ultimately prevail. The next morning brought a mixture of triumph and frustration. Sarah received notification that she had achieved the highest overall scores in the evaluation program, surpassing all other candidates in both technical proficiency and tactical decision-making. However, her Apache assignment request had been denied. Instead, she was offered a position flying Blackhawks in support operations, essentially the same role she had performed at her previous assignment. The offer came with praise for her exceptional abilities and assurances that the position would provide valuable experience for future opportunities. Sarah accepted the assignment professionally, though privately she felt the familiar sting of institutional barriers that seemed to persistently limit her career advancement despite consistently superior performance. She had proven her capabilities beyond any reasonable doubt, yet the outcome remained unchanged. As she prepared to leave Fort Carson, Sarah reflected on the lessons learned during the evaluation process. Excellence alone was insufficient to overcome entrenched resistance to change. However, her documented performance had established a baseline that would be difficult to ignore in future assignment decisions. The seeds of change had been planted, though their growth would require continued demonstration of exceptional capability combined with institutional pressure for reform. Sarah's journey toward her Apache assignment was far from over, but this setback would only strengthen her determination to prove that gender had no bearing on combat effectiveness. Her time at Fort Carson concluded with a private meeting with Torres, the veteran Apache pilot who had praised her performance during the tactical exercises. His words would prove prophetic in ways neither of them could anticipate. "Keep pushing, Mitchell," he said. "The Apache community needs pilots like you, whether they realize it now or not. Your time will come, and when it does, you'll be ready." 6 months after the Fort Carson evaluation, Captain Sarah Mitchell found herself stationed at Fort Stewart, Georgia, flying medical evacuation missions in a UH-60 Blackhawk. The assignment was respectable and important, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her talents were being underutilized. Her requests for transfer to attack helicopter units had been consistently denied, usually with vague explanations about timing and operational requirements. The morning briefing on March 15th brought unexpected news. Major Patricia Reeves, the 3rd Infantry Division's Aviation Operations Officer, stood before the assembled pilots with an expression that indicated significant developments. Due to urgent operational requirements in Afghanistan, we're implementing immediate personnel transfers, Reeves announced. Several pilots will be reassigned to fill critical shortages in combat units deployed to Forward Operating Base Meridian. Sarah listened intently as Reeves read through the assignment list. Most transfers involved experienced pilots moving to leadership positions or specialized roles that matched their backgrounds. When her name was called, Sarah was surprised by the destination. Captain Mitchell, you're being transferred to the 1st Battalion, 227th Aviation Regiment, stationed at FOB Meridian. You'll be assigned to Apache operations as co-pilot under Chief Warrant Officer Elena Vasquez. The room fell silent for a moment. Apache assignments were typically reserved for pilots who had completed the specialized training program that Sarah had been denied. Her transfer represented an unusual deviation from standard procedures, though the operational necessities of combat deployment apparently outweighed normal protocols. After the briefing, Sarah approached Major Reeves privately to clarify the circumstances of her assignment. "Ma'am, I haven't completed Apache-specific training. Is there additional preparation time allocated before deployment?" Reeves consulted her personnel files before responding. "Your evaluation scores from Fort Carson were exceptional, and Warrant Officer Vasquez specifically requested an experienced pilot as her co-pilot. She reviewed your file and recommended immediate assignment based on your demonstrated capabilities." This information intrigued Sarah. Elena Vasquez had a legendary reputation within Army aviation circles. A combat veteran with over 300 Apache flight hours in Afghanistan and Iraq, Vasquez was known for her tactical innovation and exceptional flying skills. Her endorsement carried significant weight throughout the aviation community. "Deployment is in 10 days, Reeves continued. "You'll receive accelerated Apache systems training at Fort Rucker before joining your unit. It's an intensive program, but given your background, the training officers believe you can successfully complete it." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This opportunity represented everything she had worked toward, but the compressed timeline and combat environment would test her abilities under the most demanding conditions possible. There would be no margin for error and no second chances if she failed to meet expectations. The flight to Fort Rucker took place the following morning. During the journey, Sarah reviewed technical manuals and system specifications for the AH-64 Apache helicopter. The aircraft was far more complex than anything she had previously flown, with integrated weapons systems, advanced sensors, and electronic warfare capabilities that required extensive training to operate effectively. At Fort Rucker, she was greeted by Master Sergeant Carl Rodriguez, a senior instructor with the Apache training program. Rodriguez had been briefed on Sarah's situation and the accelerated timeline for her preparation. "Captain Mitchell, we have 8 days to prepare you for combat operations," Rodriguez said without preamble. "Normal Apache transition training takes 16 weeks. We'll be covering the essential systems and procedures, but there won't be time for the comprehensive program that other pilots receive." The training schedule was brutal. Sarah spent 14 hours daily in classrooms, simulators, and aircraft, absorbing information at a pace that pushed her intellectual and physical limits. She studied weapons systems integration, target acquisition procedures, communications protocols, and emergency procedures that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Rodriguez proved to be an exceptional instructor, tailoring the training program to maximize Sarah's learning efficiency. He identified her strengths in aircraft handling and navigation, then focused additional time on areas that were completely new to her, particularly the complex weapons systems that distinguished Apache helicopters from transport aircraft. "The Apache is essentially a flying weapons platform," Rodriguez explained during a systems orientation session. "Everything about this aircraft is designed around the primary mission of finding, fixing, and destroying enemy targets while protecting friendly forces." Sarah absorbed this philosophy completely, understanding that her role would be fundamentally different from her previous assignments. Transport flying emphasized safety, efficiency, and passenger comfort. Apache operations prioritized mission effectiveness, tactical advantage, and combat lethality. The simulator training proved particularly challenging. Rodriguez programmed increasingly complex scenarios that required Sarah to operate multiple systems simultaneously while making split-second tactical decisions. The learning curve was steep, but her previous aviation experience provided a foundation that allowed rapid skill development. "Your aircraft handling is exceptional," Rodriguez noted after a particularly difficult training session. "Most pilots struggle with Apache flight characteristics for weeks. You adapted immediately." Sarah appreciated the feedback, though she remained focused on mastering the aspects of Apache operations that were completely foreign to her experience. Weapons employment required precise coordination between pilot and co-pilot, with timing measured in milliseconds and accuracy measured in meters at distances exceeding 2 miles. On the 4th day of training, Rodriguez introduced live fire exercises using the Apache's 30mm chain gun. Sarah had never operated weapon systems of this magnitude, and the responsibility felt overwhelming initially. However, her natural hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness translated well to gunnery operations. "Smooth trigger control," Rodriguez coached as Sarah engaged targets on the range. "The gun responds to subtle inputs. Let the aircraft's stabilization systems do the work." Sarah's performance improved rapidly with practice. By the end of the session, she was achieving accuracy scores that impressed even the experienced instructors observing the training. Her ability to coordinate aircraft maneuvering with weapons employment suggested a natural aptitude for combat operations. The advanced training phase introduced night operations and adverse weather flying. Apache helicopters often conducted missions in conditions that grounded other aircraft, requiring pilots to operate sophisticated sensor systems while navigating through darkness, sandstorms, or heavy precipitation. Sarah found these challenges invigorating rather than intimidating. The technical complexity engaged her analytical mind, while the demanding flight conditions tested her flying skills in ways that transport operations never had. She began to understand why Apache pilots developed such intense loyalty to their aircraft and mission. Rodriguez noted her progression in the daily training reports. "Captain Mitchell demonstrates exceptional adaptability and learning capacity," he wrote. "Her performance in advanced scenarios exceeds expectations for pilots with significantly more Apache experience." However, not all aspects of the training proceeded smoothly. Sarah encountered resistance from some instructors who questioned the wisdom of her accelerated preparation. During a break between sessions, she overheard a conversation that reflected ongoing skepticism about her assignment. 8 days isn't enough time to properly prepare anyone for combat Apache operations, instructor Captain James Morrison was saying to a colleague. "She might be technically proficient, but combat is different. Lives depend on split-second decisions and absolute trust between crew members." Morrison's concerns reflected broader institutional reservations about rapid personnel transitions, particularly involving female pilots assigned to combat roles. Sarah understood that her success or failure would influence future policies regarding similar assignments. The final training exercise involved a comprehensive mission scenario that simulated actual combat conditions. Sarah was paired with an experienced Apache pilot who acted as her co-pilot while she served as pilot in command for the exercise. The scenario included multiple target engagements, close air support coordination, and emergency procedures that tested every aspect of her training. Sarah's performance was exceptional. She successfully completed all mission objectives while demonstrating sound tactical judgment and precise weapons employment. Her coordination with ground forces was seamless, and her emergency responses were executed flawlessly when instructors introduced simulated system failures. "Outstanding mission execution," Rodriguez announced during the post-exercise debrief. "Captain Mitchell has demonstrated readiness for combat operations." The formal evaluation process culminated with a comprehensive examination that covered technical knowledge, tactical procedures, and operational protocols. Sarah scored in the 97th percentile, a remarkable achievement given her compressed training timeline. Rodriguez presented her with Apache pilot wings during a brief ceremony attended by the training staff. "These wings represent membership in an elite community," he said solemnly. "Apache pilots have a special responsibility to protect ground forces and accomplish missions that other aircraft cannot attempt." Sarah accepted the wings with deep appreciation for their significance. She had achieved a milestone that many pilots never reached, despite facing institutional barriers and an accelerated preparation schedule that had tested her limits. The flight to Afghanistan departed from Charleston Air Force Base 3 days later. Sarah used the long journey to review tactical publications and intelligence briefings that provided insight into the operational environment she would soon enter. The information painted a picture of complex terrain, sophisticated enemy tactics, and ongoing combat operations that demanded the highest levels of professional competency. During a refueling stop in Germany, Sarah had an opportunity to speak with other pilots who were rotating back to the United States after completing their deployment tours. Their perspectives on Apache operations proved invaluable for understanding the realities of combat flying. "The most important thing is trust," explained Chief Warrant Officer Michael Stevens, a veteran pilot returning from his third combat tour. "Your co-pilot's life depends on your decisions, and your life depends on theirs. Everything else is secondary to that relationship." Stevens also provided practical advice about operating in the Afghan environment. "The terrain is challenging, the weather is unpredictable, and the enemy is adaptive," he explained. "Standard procedures are important, but you need to be ready to improvise when situations develop beyond normal parameters." Sarah absorbed this guidance while mentally preparing for her first meeting with Elena Vasquez. The legendary pilot's reputation was intimidating, but Sarah was eager to learn from someone with extensive combat experience and proven tactical expertise. The final approach to Bagram Airfield brought Sarah's first view of Afghanistan's dramatic landscape. Snow-capped mountains rose from desert valleys, creating terrain that was both beautiful and tactically challenging. She could see why helicopter operations in this environment required exceptional skill and careful planning. After landing, Sarah was transported to Forward Operating Base Meridian, a smaller facility located closer to active combat operations. The base buzzed with activity as various military units conducted training, maintenance, and mission planning activities. Apache helicopters sat on the flight line like sleeping predators, their angular profiles suggesting lethal capability even at rest. Chief Warrant Officer Elena Vasquez was waiting in the Aviation Operations Center when Sarah arrived. Vasquez was smaller than Sarah had expected, but her presence filled the room with quiet authority. Her flight suit bore patches indicating multiple combat deployments and specialized qualifications that represented years of operational experience. "Captain Mitchell," Vasquez said, extending her hand with a firm grip, "welcome to FOB Meridian. I've reviewed your training reports from Fort Rucker. Rodriguez speaks highly of your capabilities." Sarah expressed her appreciation for the opportunity and her eagerness to contribute to the unit's mission. Vasquez studied her carefully before continuing the conversation. "Apache operations here are different from anything you've experienced," Vasquez explained. "We support ground forces in direct contact with enemy fighters, often in close proximity to friendly troops. Mistakes aren't just mission failures, they're potential friendly fire incidents." The weight of responsibility was clear in Vasquez's words. Sarah acknowledged her understanding while expressing confidence in her preparation and commitment to excellence. "Your first month will be transitional," Vasquez continued. "You'll fly as co-pilot while learning our tactical procedures and operational environment. After that, we'll evaluate your readiness for more complex missions." Sarah nodded, understanding that she was beginning a probationary period that would determine her future role within the unit. Excellence was expected, but adaptation to combat conditions would be the ultimate test of her capabilities. As Vasquez concluded the orientation briefing, she offered one final piece of advice that would prove prophetic in the coming weeks. "Combat has a way of revealing character," she said quietly. "Training prepares you for procedures and techniques, but your true capabilities will emerge when lives depend on your decisions under fire." Sarah's first combat mission came sooner than expected. 3 days after arriving at FOB Meridian, intelligence reports indicated increased enemy activity near Firebase Delta, a remote outpost that guarded a critical supply route through the Hindu Kush Mountains. The firebase housed 47 soldiers from the 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment, along with Afghan National Army advisors and specialized communications equipment. Chief Warrant Officer Elena Vasquez briefed Sarah on the mission during the pre-dawn hours of March 28th. Intelligence suggested that Taliban fighters were positioning themselves for a coordinated attack on Firebase Delta, using the mountainous terrain to conceal their movements from ground-based surveillance. "This will be a reconnaissance mission initially," Vasquez explained as they reviewed satellite imagery in the operations center. "We'll conduct armed overwatch while ground forces assess the threat level. If contact occurs, we'll provide close air support as directed by the ground commander." Sarah studied the topographical maps intently, noting the challenging terrain surrounding Firebase Delta. The outpost sat in a narrow valley surrounded by steep ridges that provided numerous concealment positions for enemy forces. Helicopter operations would be complicated by high altitude, unpredictable wind patterns, and limited maneuvering space. Altitude will affect our performance significantly, Vasquez continued. We'll be operating at 8,000 feet, which reduces engine power and rotor effectiveness. Weight and balance calculations become critical at this elevation. Sarah had studied high-altitude operations during her training, but the theoretical knowledge felt different when applied to actual combat conditions. The thin air would affect everything from fuel consumption to weapons accuracy, requiring constant adjustments to standard procedures. The aircraft they would fly was Apache 21-647, nicknamed Lightning Strike by its crew chief, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos. Santos had maintained the helicopter through multiple deployments and took personal pride in its exceptional readiness rate. She briefed Sarah on the aircraft's specific characteristics and recent maintenance history. "This bird responds well to smooth control inputs," Santos explained during the pre-flight inspection. "The tail rotor was recently overhauled, so you might notice a slightly different pedal response. Engine temperatures run a bit high at altitude, but they're within normal parameters." Sarah appreciated Santos's detailed knowledge of the aircraft. Crew chiefs formed essential partnerships with pilots, and their expertise often prevented mechanical problems that could prove catastrophic during combat operations. She made mental notes of Santos's observations while conducting her own thorough inspection of the helicopter's systems. The pre-flight briefing included weather updates that painted a concerning picture. A storm system was moving through the region, bringing high winds and reduced visibility that would complicate flying conditions. The mission timeline became critical, as deteriorating weather could force mission cancellation or emergency landing procedures. "We have a 4-hour window before conditions become prohibitive," announced Captain Rachel Torres, the battalion meteorologist. "Wind speeds are currently manageable, but they're increasing steadily. Visibility is 7 miles and decreasing." Vasquez absorbed this information while calculating fuel requirements and alternate landing sites. Combat missions required extensive contingency planning, as changing conditions could force rapid mission modifications or emergency procedures. "We'll monitor the weather continuously during the flight," Vasquez decided. "If conditions deteriorate beyond acceptable limits, we'll return immediately. No mission is worth risking aircraft and crew unnecessarily." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension as they completed final preparations. This would be her first time flying in actual combat conditions, where enemy forces would be actively trying to shoot down their aircraft. All her training and preparation had led to this moment. The Apache's twin-turbine engines spooled up with their characteristic whine as Vasquez initiated the startup sequence. Sarah monitored engine parameters and system status while conducting final communications checks with ground control. Every gauge, switch, and indicator had to be perfect before departing the relative safety of the base. "Lightning Strike, ready for departure," Vasquez announced over the radio. "Lightning Strike, cleared for takeoff. Contact Overlord on frequency 243.5 for mission coordination. A weather advisory remains in effect. Winds variable at 25 knots, gusting to 40. The helicopter lifted smoothly from the landing pad, its rotor blades carving through the thin mountain air. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of flight, but the Apache's response characteristics were noticeably different from the transport helicopters she had previously flown. The aircraft felt more aggressive, more responsive to control inputs, as if it were eager for combat. During the 40-minute flight to Firebase Delta, Sarah familiarized herself with the Apache's advanced sensor systems. The target acquisition and designation site provided detailed imagery of the terrain below, while thermal sensors revealed heat signatures that could indicate enemy positions or activities. "Learn to trust the sensors but never rely on them completely," Vasquez advised as Sarah practiced with the targeting systems. "Technology is a tool, but pilot judgment remains the most important factor in successful missions." The landscape below them was breathtaking and intimidating in equal measure. Jagged peaks rose to heights exceeding 12,000 feet, while deep valleys carved by ancient rivers created a maze of potential hiding places for enemy forces. Sarah began to understand why Afghanistan had proven so challenging for military operations throughout history. As they approached Firebase Delta, Sarah could see the outpost's defensive positions carved into the mountainside. Concrete barriers, sandbagged fighting positions, and communication antennas created a small island of military activity in the vast wilderness. The sight reminded her of the isolation faced by the soldiers stationed at such remote locations. "Lightning Strike, "This is Delta Base," came the radio call from the Firebase's command post. "We have movement observed on the North Ridge Line, approximately 2 kilometers from our position. Request armed reconnaissance of that area." Vasquez acknowledged the transmission while adjusting their flight path toward the indicated coordinates. Sarah activated the Apache's sensors and began scanning the designated area for signs of enemy activity. The thermal imaging revealed several heat signatures that could represent human movement, though the range made positive identification difficult. "I'm seeing thermal contacts on the ridge," Sarah reported. "Multiple signatures, possibly 8 to 10 individuals moving in tactical formation." Vasquez maneuvered the Apache for a better observation angle while maintaining sufficient altitude to avoid potential ground fire. Through the targeting sight, they could observe armed figures moving deliberately along mountain paths that would provide excellent firing positions overlooking Firebase Delta. "Delta Base, lightning strike. We have visual confirmation of armed personnel on the North Ridge. Recommend increased alert status and defensive preparations." The Firebase commander's response was immediate and tense. "Lightning strike, we're taking small arms fire from multiple positions. Request immediate close air support. We have wounded personnel and need emergency evacuation support." The situation escalated rapidly from reconnaissance to active combat. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as Vasquez transitioned the Apache from observation mode to attack configuration. The helicopter's weapons systems came online, including the 30mm chain gun and Hellfire missiles that could engage targets at extended ranges. "Sarah, you'll operate the gun while I handle missile employment," Vasquez instructed calmly. "Target the muzzle flashes on the ridgeline, but watch for ground forces marking their positions with signal panels." Sarah centered the targeting reticle on the enemy positions while coordinating with the ground commander to ensure positive identification of friendly and enemy forces. The complexity of close air support required absolute precision to avoid friendly fire incidents while effectively neutralizing threats to the ground troops. "Lightning strike Delta Base. Marking friendly positions with purple smoke, the enemy is approximately 200 meters north of the smoke signal." Sarah adjusted her targeting solution based on the ground reference point, while Vasquez positioned the Apache for an effective attack run. The helicopter's advanced fire control system calculated range, target movement, and ballistic corrections automatically. But pilot skill remained essential for successful weapons employment. "Engaging enemy positions," Vasquez announced over the radio as Sarah squeezed the trigger. The Apache's 30mm chain gun erupted with devastating effect, sending high explosive rounds toward the enemy positions at a rate of 600 rounds per minute. Sarah watched through the targeting sight as the rounds impacted accurately on the ridgeline, forcing the enemy fighters to seek cover and disrupting their coordinated attack. The engagement continued for 15 minutes, as Vasquez and Sarah systematically neutralized enemy positions while coordinating with ground forces to ensure comprehensive coverage of the battlefield. Sarah's performance was steady and precise, her gunnery accuracy exceeding expectations for a pilot on her first combat mission. "Outstanding shooting," Vasquez commented during a brief lull in the action. "You're tracking targets like a veteran." However, the tactical situation remained fluid and dangerous. Enemy forces had positioned themselves in multiple locations, creating a complex battlefield where threats could emerge from various directions. The Apache crew needed to maintain constant vigilance while providing continuous support to the embattled ground forces. "Lightning strike, we're taking heavy fire from the East Canyon," reported Delta Base. "Multiple wounded, including our medic. We need immediate evacuation support for critical casualties." This request presented a new challenge. Medical evacuation required precise coordination between attack helicopters, transport aircraft, and ground forces. Sarah realized that her role was expanding beyond weapons employment to include complex mission coordination under combat conditions. Vasquez made rapid calculations regarding fuel status, weather conditions, and tactical requirements. "Delta Base will provide cover for medevac operations, marking LZ with smoke in 3 minutes." The next phase of the mission required Sarah to transition between multiple roles: gunner, sensor operator, and communications coordinator. She maintained surveillance of potential threat areas while coordinating with incoming medical evacuation helicopters and directing their approach to the landing zone. "Dustoff 67, Lightning Strike, LZ is secure for landing. Wind is variable at 25 knots from the southwest. Be advised, scattered enemy positions remain active in the area." Sarah watched through the thermal sight as the medical helicopter approached Firebase Delta, its crew displaying remarkable courage by flying into an active combat zone to evacuate wounded soldiers. The sight reinforced her understanding of the interconnected nature of military operations, where every unit's success depended on the performance of countless others. The medevac operation proceeded successfully, though not without complications. As the medical helicopter departed with the wounded soldiers, enemy forces attempted to engage it with rocket-propelled grenades. Sarah quickly identified the threat and engaged the enemy position with precise gunfire that neutralized the immediate danger. "Threat eliminated," she reported calmly, though her heart was racing from the intensity of the engagement. As the immediate crisis subsided, Vasquez began planning their return to base. Fuel levels were approaching minimum reserves, and the deteriorating weather conditions made extended operations increasingly risky. However, their mission had been successful. Firebase Delta was secure, wounded soldiers were receiving medical treatment, and enemy forces had been effectively neutralized. Delta Base Lightning Strike. The area appears secure. We're departing for base due to fuel and weather considerations. Call sign Thunder 34 will assume overwatch responsibilities. The flight back to FOB Meridian provided Sarah with an opportunity to process her first combat experience. She had performed well under extreme pressure, successfully employing weapon systems while coordinating complex operations involving multiple aircraft and ground units. The mission represented a significant milestone in her development as a combat pilot. "You handled that like a seasoned veteran," Vasquez observed as they approached their home base. "Most pilots struggle with target identification and engagement procedures on their first combat mission. Your performance was exceptional." Sarah appreciated the recognition, though she remained focused on identifying areas where her performance could be improved. Combat flying required constant learning and adaptation, as no two missions presented identical challenges or tactical situations. During the post-mission debrief, intelligence officers gathered detailed information about enemy tactics, weapons, employment effectiveness, and coordination procedures. Sarah's observations about target behavior and engagement results contributed valuable data for future mission planning and tactical development. Colonel Catherine Webb, the battalion commander, attended the debriefing personally, indicating the mission's significance within the broader operational picture. Her presence suggested that Sarah's performance had attracted attention from senior leadership. "Excellent mission execution," Webb commented after reviewing the operational summary. "The coordination between air and ground forces was textbook quality, and the weapons employment was precise and effective." Sarah felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, though she remained aware that this mission represented only the beginning of her combat deployment. Future operations would present new challenges and require continued development of her tactical expertise and leadership capabilities. As she completed her equipment maintenance and mission documentation, Sarah reflected on the day's events. She had successfully transitioned from training to combat operations, proving that her capabilities extended beyond academic excellence to include practical performance under the most demanding conditions possible. The mission also reinforced her understanding of the responsibilities that came with Apache operations. Every decision affected the lives of ground forces who depended on air support for their survival and mission success. This realization would guide her approach to future operations and professional development. Over the following weeks, Sarah established herself as one of the most capable pilots in the 1st Battalion, 227th Aviation Regiment. Her mission success rate was perfect, and her tactical innovations had been adopted by other crews facing similar challenges in the complex Afghan terrain. However, success brought unexpected complications that tested her in ways beyond combat flying. The morning briefing on April 18th carried an unusual tension. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson had arrived at FOB Meridian for a quarterly evaluation of unit effectiveness, bringing with him preconceived notions about female pilots in combat roles. His reputation preceded him, the same officer who had initially blocked Sarah's Apache assignment at Fort Carson. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Colonel Webb during the command briefing, "Colonel Thompson will be conducting comprehensive assessments of our operational procedures and personnel performance. His recommendations will influence future manning decisions and resource allocations." Sarah felt the weight of scrutiny settle over her like a heavy cloak. Thompson's presence meant that her every action would be evaluated not just for tactical effectiveness, but for its implications regarding gender integration in combat aviation. The stakes had suddenly escalated beyond personal achievement to institutional policy. Chief Warrant Officer Elena Vasquez approached Sarah privately after the briefing concluded. "Thompson's arrival isn't coincidental," she said quietly. "There's been discussion at division level about the effectiveness of accelerated Apache training programs. Your performance will be used as a case study." The implications were clear. Sarah had become a test case for broader military personnel policies. Her success or failure would influence decisions affecting countless other women seeking opportunities in combat aviation. The pressure was enormous, but Sarah had faced institutional barriers before and understood that excellence remained her most effective response. "I've been assigned as Thompson's pilot for orientation flights," Vasquez continued. "He specifically requested to observe operations involving our newest crew members. He wants to see you in action." 3 days later, Sarah found herself preparing for a mission unlike any she had previously flown. Intelligence reports indicated that high-value targets were meeting at a compound in the Korangal Valley, one of the most dangerous areas in Afghanistan. The mission would require precise coordination between multiple aircraft, special operations forces, and conventional ground units. Thompson observed the mission briefing from the back of the operations center, taking detailed notes while Sarah and other pilots reviewed tactical plans. His presence was noted by every person in the room, creating an atmosphere of heightened attention to detail and procedure. "This operation represents the most complex mission profile we've attempted this deployment," explained Major Douglas Chen, the operations officer. "Multiple target buildings, sophisticated enemy air defenses, and challenging extraction requirements for ground forces." Sarah studied the intelligence imagery carefully, noting the compound's defensive positions and escape routes that enemy forces might use if the operation was compromised. The mission would require split-second timing and flawless execution to prevent high-value targets from escaping while ensuring the safety of friendly forces. Apache teams will provide overwatch during infiltration, then close air support during the assault phase, Chen continued. Weather conditions are marginal, with low ceilings and variable winds that will complicate flying conditions. The aircraft assignment paired Sarah with Captain Kevin Brooks, an experienced Apache pilot who had completed 2 previous combat deployments. Brooks had initially been skeptical about flying with a female co-pilot, but Sarah's performance over recent weeks had earned his respect and confidence. "I've reviewed your recent mission reports," Brooks told Sarah during their pre-flight planning session. "Your gunnery accuracy is exceptional, and your coordination with ground forces has been flawless. I'm confident we'll work well together." Sarah appreciated his professional assessment, though she remained aware that Thompson would be monitoring their performance closely. Every radio transmission, weapons engagement, and tactical decision would be scrutinized for evidence supporting or contradicting arguments about female combat effectiveness. The pre-flight inspection revealed a maintenance issue that threatened to ground their aircraft. The forward-looking infrared sensor was displaying intermittent malfunctions that could compromise target identification capabilities during night operations. Staff Sergeant Santos worked frantically to resolve the problem while the mission timeline compressed. "I can bypass the primary sensor and route video through the secondary system," Santos explained to Sarah and Brooks. "You'll have full capability, but the interface will be slightly different from what you're accustomed to." Sarah studied the modified sensor configuration quickly, adapting her operational procedures to accommodate the technical changes. Her ability to rapidly adjust to unexpected circumstances impressed Brooks, who had seen many pilots struggle with similar equipment modifications. "Most pilots would request aircraft substitution rather than adapt to sensor changes," he observed. "Your flexibility is exactly what we need for complex missions like this." The modified Apache performed flawlessly during the flight to the target area, with Sarah successfully operating the altered sensor systems while maintaining navigation and communications responsibilities. Her adaptability under pressure demonstrated the kind of problem-solving skills that distinguished exceptional pilots from merely competent ones. As they approached the Korangal Valley, weather conditions deteriorated exactly as forecasted. Cloud ceilings dropped to dangerous levels, while wind patterns created turbulence that challenged even experienced pilots. Sarah noticed several other aircraft requesting mission delays due to weather concerns. "Lightning strike, this is Overlord," came the transmission from Mission Control. "Be advised, Ghost Rider 21 has declared weather abort due to control difficulties. Do you require a mission delay?" Brooks looked at Sarah, who was smoothly managing the Apache's flight controls despite the challenging conditions. Her flying was precise and confident, maintaining perfect formation position while navigating through the turbulent air mass. Negative, Overlord. Lightning strike is mission-capable, weather conditions are manageable. Sarah felt a surge of pride at Brooks's confidence in her flying abilities. She had successfully demonstrated that her skills extended beyond fair weather operations to include the kind of demanding conditions that often determined mission success or failure. The target compound appeared through the thermal sensors as they established their overwatch position. Sarah immediately began identifying defensive positions, guard posts, and potential escape routes that intelligence had missed during preliminary planning. Her thorough analysis provided ground forces with critical tactical information. "I'm seeing additional structures not shown in the intelligence briefing," Sarah reported to the ground commander. 2 guard towers on the east side, and what appears to be a tunnel entrance behind the main building. This information proved crucial when Special Operations Forces began their infiltration. The previously unidentified guard positions could have compromised the entire operation if Sarah hadn't detected them during initial reconnaissance. "Outstanding observation skills," Brooks commented over the internal communications system. "That kind of attention to detail prevents mission failures." The assault phase began with precision strikes against communication equipment and defensive positions. Sarah's weapons employment was flawless, neutralizing threats without causing collateral damage to structures that might contain valuable intelligence materials. However, the mission complexity increased when enemy reinforcements arrived unexpectedly from a direction not covered by friendly forces. Sarah quickly identified the threat and coordinated with ground units to reposition their defensive perimeter. Quote, "Ghost Rider elements, lightning strike, multiple enemy vehicles approaching from the southwest. Recommend immediate displacement to cover positions Alpha and Bravo." Her tactical awareness and rapid communication prevented ground forces from being caught in an exposed position during the enemy counterattack. The mission continued successfully because of her vigilance and professional competence. Throughout the engagement, Thompson monitored radio transmissions from the command center, documenting Sarah's performance in detail. Her calm professionalism under extreme pressure was evident in every communication, and her tactical contributions were measurably improving mission effectiveness. The operation concluded successfully with the capture of 2 high-value targets and the recovery of significant intelligence materials. Sarah's contributions had been essential to the mission's success, from initial reconnaissance to final extraction support. During the post-mission debrief, Thompson questioned Sarah directly about her decision-making process during critical phases of the operation. His questions were probing and detailed, clearly designed to assess her tactical understanding and leadership potential. "Captain Mitchell, your identification of additional defensive positions prevented potential casualties among friendly forces," Thompson noted. "Walk me through your sensor scanning procedures and target prioritization methodology." Sarah explained her systematic approach to reconnaissance operations, detailing how she integrated multiple sensor inputs with visual observations to create comprehensive tactical pictures. Her explanation demonstrated a thorough understanding of complex operational concepts and their practical application. "Your weapons employment during the reinforcement engagement was particularly effective," Thompson continued. "What factors influenced your target selection and engagement sequence?" Again, Sarah's response revealed sophisticated tactical thinking that impressed even skeptical observers. She had successfully coordinated multiple variables: friendly force positions, enemy capabilities, terrain features, and mission objectives into optimal engagement decisions. Thompson's evaluation report, completed that evening, would prove to be a turning point in institutional attitudes toward female combat pilots. Sarah had demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt that gender had no bearing on tactical competence or combat effectiveness. "Captain Mitchell represents the kind of pilot we need in Apache operations regardless of gender," Thompson wrote in his assessment. "Her technical skills, tactical judgment, and leadership capabilities exceed those of many pilots with significantly more experience." However, Sarah's greatest challenge still lay ahead. Intelligence reports were beginning to indicate a major enemy offensive planned against Firebase Delta, the same outpost she had helped defend during her first combat mission. The scale of the anticipated attack would test every skill she had developed and push her capabilities to their absolute limits. Colonel Webb briefed the aviation units on the developing threat during the evening command meeting. "Intelligence suggests a coordinated assault involving multiple enemy groups and sophisticated weapons systems," she explained. This represents the most significant threat we've faced during this deployment. Sarah listened intently as Webb outlined the enemy's probable courses of action. The anticipated attack would involve coordinated assaults from multiple directions, advanced anti-aircraft weapons, and suicide bomb vehicles designed to breach the firebase's defensive perimeter. Our response will require maximum coordination between all available air assets, Webb continued. Every pilot and crew chief must be prepared for sustained combat operations under extremely challenging conditions. As the briefing concluded, Sarah realized that everything she had accomplished during her deployment had been preparation for this ultimate test. The upcoming battle would determine not just the fate of Firebase Delta and its 47 defenders, but also the future of her career and the opportunities available to female pilots who would follow her example. Vasquez approached Sarah as they left the briefing room. "You've proven yourself in every mission so far," she said quietly, "but what's coming will be different. This will be the kind of combat that defines careers and shapes institutional memory." Sarah nodded, understanding the magnitude of what lay ahead. She had overcome institutional barriers, excelled in training, and proven her combat effectiveness. Now she would face the ultimate test of her skills, courage, and determination under conditions that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. The next morning brought ominous intelligence updates. Enemy forces were massing in unprecedented numbers, bringing with them weapons systems that posed serious threats to helicopter operations. The battle for Firebase Delta would begin within days, and Sarah would play a crucial role in determining its outcome. As she completed her daily training flight, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Every challenge had prepared her for what was coming, and she felt ready to face whatever trials awaited. Her aircraft was perfectly maintained, her skills were sharp, and her determination was unshakable. The proving ground was about to become a battlefield, and Sarah Mitchell was ready to demonstrate once and for all that excellence in combat aviation had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with skill, courage, and the will to succeed against impossible odds. The enemy assault on Firebase Delta began at 0347 hours on May 3rd, with a coordinated barrage of mortar rounds and rocket-propelled grenades that shattered the pre-dawn quiet across the Hindu Kush Mountains. Captain Sarah Mitchell was already airborne in Apache 21 to 647 when the first explosions illuminated the distant firebase, her aircraft loaded with maximum ammunition and fuel for what intelligence predicted would be a prolonged engagement. "Lightning strike, this is Delta Base," came the urgent radio transmission from Firebase Delta's command post. "We are under heavy attack from multiple directions. Estimate company-sized assault with armor support. Request immediate close air support." Sarah's pulse quickened as she processed the tactical situation developing 40 kilometers ahead. Company-sized meant over 100 enemy fighters, while armor support indicated tanks or armored personnel carriers that posed serious threats to the firebase's defensive positions. This was the large-scale assault that intelligence had predicted, and it was unfolding with devastating effectiveness. Chief Warrant Officer Ada Vasquez, flying as Sarah's wingman in Apache 22 to 881, established tactical communications as they raced toward the embattled outpost. "Lightning strike elements maintain formation spacing. Be advised, the enemy has deployed surface-to-air missiles. Expect sophisticated air defenses." The flight to Firebase Delta revealed the scope of the enemy offensive. Thermal sensors detected multiple vehicle columns converging on the outpost from 3 directions, while muzzle flashes from small arms and heavy weapons created a deadly constellation of threats surrounding the isolated garrison. Sarah had never seen combat on this scale, but her training and recent experience had prepared her for exactly this moment. "Lightning strike led. I'm seeing armor movement on the north approach," Sarah reported as her sensors identified tracked vehicles advancing through a narrow valley toward the firebase's main gate. 2 tanks and multiple personnel carriers, approximately 3 kilometers from the defensive perimeter. The enemy had chosen their timing perfectly. Dawn assault provided enough light for accurate weapons employment while limiting the effectiveness of thermal sensors that gave Apache helicopters their primary advantage during night operations. Sarah realized that this battle would test every aspect of her training and combat experience. As they approached weapon range, Firebase Delta's defensive situation became starkly apparent. The outpost was completely surrounded, with enemy forces occupying commanding positions on the surrounding ridgelines. Mortar rounds fell steadily within the perimeter, while machine gun fire raked the defensive positions, forcing the 47 defenders to seek cover in bunkers and fighting positions. Delta Base, Lightning Strike Lead, we have a visual on your position. What are your immediate priorities? Lightning Strike, we've got wounded personnel trapped in the motor pool area. Enemy armor is advancing on the north gate, and our anti-tank weapons were destroyed in the initial bombardment. We need those tanks stopped immediately. Sarah coordinated with Vasquez to divide tactical responsibilities. Vasquez would engage the advancing armor while Sarah provided close air support for the trapped soldiers in the motor pool. The plan required precise timing and flawless execution, as any mistake could result in friendly fire casualties. Engaging lead tank with Hellfire, Vasquez announced, as she maneuvered her Apache into attack position. Sarah watched through her targeting sight as the missile streaked toward its target, impacting with devastating effect. The tank disappeared in a fireball that illuminated the entire valley, but the remaining armor continued advancing while enemy forces intensified their assault on the firebase. Sarah identified the trapped soldiers' position and began engaging enemy fighters who had infiltrated close to the perimeter. Her 30mm gunfire was precise and effective, creating gaps in the enemy assault that allowed friendly forces to reposition and establish better defensive coverage. However, the tactical situation deteriorated rapidly when enemy surface-to-air missiles began targeting the Apache helicopters. Sarah felt her aircraft shudder as a missile detonated nearby, its shrapnel peppering the helicopter's armored fuselage and damaging several critical systems. Lightning Strike Lead, I'm showing multiple system failures, Sarah reported calmly, despite the gravity of her situation. Hydraulic pressure is dropping, and I've lost secondary flight controls. Engine parameters are approaching critical limits. The damage was severe enough to ground most aircraft, but Sarah made a calculated decision to continue the mission. Firebase Delta's defenders were depending on air support for their survival, and abandoning them would likely result in the outpost being overrun with catastrophic casualties. Lightning Strike Lead, recommend immediate return to base, Vasquez advised over the radio. Your aircraft may not remain flight-worthy much longer. Sarah's response demonstrated the courage and determination that had defined her military career. Negative. These soldiers need our support. I can maintain flight operations long enough to make a difference. She began prioritizing targets based on their immediate threat to friendly forces, systematically engaging enemy positions while monitoring her aircraft's degrading systems. Each weapon engagement required careful calculation as ammunition was limited, and every shot needed to contribute meaningfully to the defensive effort. The enemy had positioned snipers on the surrounding ridgelines, and these marksmen were systematically engaging Firebase Delta's defenders with precision fire that prevented effective movement within the perimeter. Sarah identified several sniper positions and engaged them with precision gunfire that neutralized the immediate threat. Outstanding shooting, Lightning Strike Lead, reported Delta Base's commander. You've eliminated the sniper positions that were pinning down our southern defensive line. However, Sarah's damaged Apache was becoming increasingly difficult to control. Hydraulic fluid leaked steadily from damaged lines, reducing the responsiveness of flight controls and making precise maneuvering nearly impossible. Engine temperatures continued climbing toward dangerous levels that could result in complete power failure. Despite these challenges, Sarah continued engaging enemy targets with remarkable accuracy. Her understanding of Apache weapons systems allowed her to compensate for the aircraft's degraded performance, maintaining effective fire support when other pilots would have been forced to withdraw. The critical moment came when enemy forces breached Firebase Delta's perimeter defenses and began advancing toward the command bunker where wounded soldiers were receiving medical treatment. Overrunning this position would effectively end organized resistance and result in massive casualties among the defenders. Lightning Strike Lead, enemy has penetrated our perimeter, Delta Base reported with obvious desperation. They're advancing on the command post. We have 15 wounded personnel who cannot be moved. Sarah assessed her tactical options rapidly. Her damaged aircraft lacked the maneuverability for precision strikes near friendly positions, but conventional engagement techniques would risk friendly fire casualties. She needed an innovative solution that maximized enemy casualties while ensuring the safety of Firebase Delta's defenders. The answer came through her understanding of weapons ballistics and her exceptional flying skills. By positioning her helicopter at an extreme angle and using the mountainous terrain to mask her approach, Sarah could engage enemy forces from an unexpected direction that minimized risks to friendly personnel. Delta Base, mark your positions with infrared strobes. I'm going to try something unconventional. Sarah maneuvered her crippled Apache through a series of flying maneuvers that pushed both aircraft and pilot to their absolute limits. The helicopter responded sluggishly to control inputs, and engine parameters continued deteriorating, but she maintained precise control while positioning for the critical engagement. Engaging enemy forces in the perimeter breach, Sarah announced as she opened fire with her remaining ammunition. The 30mm cannon rounds impacted with devastating precision, eliminating the enemy assault force that had penetrated Firebase Delta's defenses. Her weapons employment was so accurate that friendly forces suffered no casualties despite the proximity of the engagement. Target destroyed, Sarah reported as the immediate threat to the command post was neutralized. Delta Base, your perimeter is secure. However, Sarah's heroic actions came at a significant cost. Her Apache's engines were failing catastrophically, and hydraulic systems had deteriorated to the point where continued flight was virtually impossible. She faced an immediate choice between attempting emergency landing procedures or risking complete aircraft failure that could result in her death and the loss of continued air support for the embattled Firebase. Lightning strike lead, your aircraft is trailing smoke and losing altitude, Vasquez observed with obvious concern. You need to auto-rotate immediately while you still have some control authority. Sarah's response exemplified the selfless dedication that had characterized her entire military career. Instead of prioritizing her personal safety, she continued providing fire support until her ammunition was completely exhausted and her aircraft could no longer maintain controlled flight. Delta Base, lightning strike lead. I've expended all ammunition and my aircraft is no longer mission capable. Request permission to attempt an emergency landing in your perimeter. The emergency landing required extraordinary flying skills under impossible conditions. Sarah's Apache had lost most of its hydraulic power, one engine was failing completely, and control responses were minimal. Nevertheless, she successfully executed an auto-rotation landing within Firebase Delta's defensive perimeter, bringing her damaged aircraft down safely despite conditions that would have resulted in catastrophic crashes for less skilled pilots. As Sarah shut down her helicopter systems, Firebase Delta's defenders emerged from their fighting positions to express their gratitude for her heroic actions. The soldiers whose lives she had saved understood that her willingness to continue fighting despite her aircraft's damage had been the decisive factor in repelling the enemy assault. Captain Mitchell said First Sergeant William Torres, Firebase Delta's senior enlisted soldier, "You saved every one of us today. We'll never forget what you did." The battle's aftermath revealed the full scope of Sarah's achievement. Enemy casualties exceeded 200 fighters, including the complete destruction of armored vehicles that had posed existential threats to the Firebase. Her accurate weapons employment had been instrumental in breaking the coordinated assault that intelligence had predicted would overwhelm the outpost's defenses. Colonel Webb arrived at Firebase Delta 6 hours later aboard a medical evacuation helicopter, bringing with her a team of maintenance specialists to assess Sarah's damaged Apache. The aircraft's condition shocked even experienced technicians who understood helicopter systems and combat damage. Captain Mitchell, Webb said after reviewing the damage assessment, "Our maintenance team indicates that your aircraft should not have been capable of continued flight operations after sustaining this level of damage. Your decision to continue the mission despite these conditions represents extraordinary courage and professional competence." Sarah's actions during the battle for Firebase Delta became the subject of detailed military analysis and institutional study. Her ability to maintain effective combat operations despite catastrophic aircraft damage demonstrated skills that exceeded normal expectations for helicopter pilots regardless of experience level or gender. The broader implications of her performance extended far beyond personal recognition. Sarah had definitively proven that female pilots possessed the technical skills, tactical judgment, and physical courage necessary for the most demanding combat operations. Her example would influence military personnel policies for decades to come. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood before a formation of Apache pilots at Fob Meridian as Colonel Webb presented her with the Distinguished Flying Cross, one of military aviation's highest honors. The citation specifically noted her exceptional heroism during the defense of Firebase Delta and her role in saving 47 lives despite operating a critically damaged aircraft. Captain Mitchell's actions exemplify the highest traditions of Army aviation, Webb announced during the ceremony. Her courage, skill, and dedication under extreme conditions represent the standard of excellence we expect from all our pilots. However, the most meaningful recognition came from the soldiers of Firebase Delta themselves. Each of the 47 men and women whose lives Sarah had saved signed a letter expressing their gratitude and respect for her heroic actions. Their words carried more weight than any official commendation or military decoration. Sarah's legacy extended beyond her individual achievements to encompass institutional change that opened opportunities for countless women who would follow her example. Apache units began actively recruiting female pilots, and training programs eliminated barriers that had previously limited women's access to combat aviation roles. Years later, when military historians studied the evolution of gender integration in combat operations, they consistently identified Sarah Mitchell's defense of Firebase Delta as a turning point that changed institutional attitudes and policies permanently. Her willingness to risk everything for the soldiers depending on her support had proven beyond any doubt that excellence in combat aviation transcended gender boundaries. The damaged Apache helicopter that Sarah had flown during the battle was eventually restored and placed on permanent display at the Army Aviation Museum, where it serves as a testament to the courage and skill of the pilot who refused to abandon her mission despite impossible odds. The placard beside the aircraft reads simply, "Flown by Captain Sarah Mitchell during the defense of Firebase Delta, May 3rd. 47 lives saved." Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.